Early in the morning of March 4, 2002, a joint special operations reconnaissance team was tasked to insert onto the mountaintop of Takur Gar by way of an MH-47 Chinook, report enemy movements, and direct airstrikes. Among them was Technical Sergeant John Chapman, a U.S. Air Force combat controller. At approximately 2:50 in the morning, the MH-47 helicopter carrying Sergeant Chapman and the Joint Special Operations Team was ambushed as it attempted to land on the mountaintop. The Chinook was rocked by RPG fire, knocking Petty Officer First Class Neil Roberts from the helicopter and into the frigid and unforgiving terrain of a snowy mountaintop named Takur Gar.
We watched the helicopter move off of my right shoulder over to from the west, moving south, infield, and as soon as it sat down on top of the mountaintop, we saw the RPG strike the aircraft, and then the aircraft move towards the valley.
We heard Mayday, 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 any Grim, any Nail, this is Mako 3-0. I got partnered up with a crew for an AC-130H Spectre gunship. On board, I was a direct support operator, which was an extra sensor that was there for surveillance and support to ground forces and the aircraft itself. We established radio contact with them and set up an initial orbit over the downed helicopter. When we were doing that, we learned from Mako 3-0, Tech Sergeant John Chapman, their combat controller. Sergeant Chapman, at that point, was telling us that they had lost a teammate.
Alone against the elements and separated from his team with enemy personnel closing in, Roberts was in desperate need of support. Despite having to make a controlled crash landing 8 kilometers away, back at Gardez, the team elected to mount an immediate and daring rescue attempt to bring Roberts back. At 4:57 a.m., after reconstituting, the team returned to Takur Gar on another Chinook in order to locate and rescue Roberts, despite knowing they were headed into enemy territory and struggling against unfavorable conditions.
These guys knew that they were going right back into the same spot that their original aircraft was shot up, and they lost a teammate out of the back end of the helicopter. So these guys, they knew what risk they were facing, and they charged right back in there to save one of their very own.
Upon touching down, Sergeant Chapman immediately identified and engaged a concealed enemy bunker in front and above his team.
He charged that initial bunker, and then from there, what my aircraft commander described as the firefight in a phone booth just unfolded.
Chapman assaulted through and cleared the bunker, killing 2 enemy combatants. Sergeant Chapman moved into the open to engage the second enemy bunker and protect his teammates. Chapman was struck and critically injured by enemy fire.
We saw tracer fire, mortars, explosions, RPGs. I mean, there was a lot of activity. Next thing you know, the team pops smoke, and they start to withdraw from the immediate area, and we're following the team from the initial infill site and where their fighting positions were as they broke contact a couple hundred meters down the mountain. So as all of this was going on, our sensor on board saw a completely separate IR strobe come active. So Mako 3-0, the main element, had withdrawn a couple hundred meters, but all of a sudden at the original point, there was an IR strobe active again. When you go back and look at the culmination of all of the sensor footages that we didn't have access to on board the aircraft or in the immediate aftermath, it became absolutely clear that it was Tech Sergeant John Chapman.
We were located approximately 3.5 to 4 clicks just north of the mountaintop, approximately about 10,000 to 11,000 feet up. At the time, I believed that there were 2 separate elements, one that had gone down or had moved down the mountaintop, and there was another element that was on top of the mountain continuing to fight in that bunker location.
Sustaining a violent engagement with multiple enemy personnel, and despite severe wounds, Sergeant Chapman continued to fight relentlessly. Throughout the next hour, the enemy bombarded Chapman's bunker position with machine gun fire, rocket-propelled grenades, and flanking movements.
I was the lead combat controller, JTAC with the Quick Reaction Force, 208 Lost Service members. The sun was coming up, it was just about dawn. We did one pass over the mountaintop, and on that second pass, we began to flare to land, and that is when we received heavy RPG and small arms fire.
At 6:11 a.m., with the QRF helicopter quickly approaching, Sergeant Chapman placed himself in a precarious position by leaving the bunker and moving into the open once again to engage the RPG team preparing to assault the incoming rescue force. Effective enemy machine gun fire struck Chapman. This time, Chapman's final desperate attempt to defeat the enemy would result in his death.
He sacrificed himself for the QRF that came in.
I think if John Chapman had not have been alive at that day, at that moment, the outcome of the insertion of the helicopter I was in with the QRF may have been drastically different. By him being there and laying suppressive fire in that position as we were flaring to land, absolutely reduced the amount of rounds the enemy was able to put into the side of the helicopter.
He volunteered to go back after he had landed back at Gardez. He didn't have to go, and he did it because he loved what he did. He loved his country, and that I'll never forget.